Hello, everybody.
I'm working with Bill at his channel.
This is one of the best problems to have. We have so many people here at Rotary today. It's taken me a moment to get your attention.
I was GM at Charlotte for a while, so I just moved back in 2019. Oh, it's a great place to be. So congratulations.
While we're sitting and starting to quiet down, a couple of reminders. We haven't started yet, but if you don't have your phone on silence, you'll interrupt the meeting later, maybe. So please do that. And then, for those of you, lots of you hadn't been here in a while, you have a meal ticket. Your meal ticket is not your raffle ticket, so put your meal ticket on your plate so they can pick it up and serve you lunch in a minute, and keep your raffle ticket for later. All right. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar. Oh, wrong script. Y'all can stand now. Friends, Rotarians, guests, welcome to the July 7th meeting of the Rotary Club of Louisville. I'm Walt Kuno, president of the club, and Paul Harris Fellow. I'm pleased to have you all here with us today. What a crowd. I appreciate y'all turning out. There's more energy in the room when there are people in the room, and this is great. So I just talked about your meal ticket. So, one of the skills that we demonstrate, our Rotary Honors Scholars, is Give Me 8. And I know a bunch of y'all know what that is. For those that don't, Give Me 8 is 5 fingers and a firm handshake, looking you dead in the eye, and a big smile. 5 plus 2 plus 3 plus 8. While my friend Ed Galloway, who first introduced me to Rotary, is coming to the stage, practice giving me 8 at your table for just a second.
Oh, we're shaking hands.
We're off to a great way here. Also, I'm loving all the smiles in the room, and you're going to hear about the smile throughout the year. It's one of the things I'm going to talk about. Anyway, Ed Galloway, person that invited me to Rotary, is attorney with Tilford, Dobbins & Schmidt, Paul Harris Fellow, and will now give the invocation.
Thank you, President Walt. Hello, everybody. Let's clear our minds and open our hearts for a moment of prayer. God of all places and people, thank you for our many blessings, in particular this club, its members, speakers, staff, servers, officers, especially President Walt. Please bless us and guide us in the year to come. Help us to find ways to bring peace to our hearts, to our lives, to our friends and community, to our country and to the world as we go about putting service above self so that all people can truly say, life is good. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Ed. And now Kevin Fields will come up and give the pledge and four-way test. Kevin is president and CEO of Louisville Central Community Center, and he's chair of our important Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And he's my newest Rotary friend who, like many of us, makes Louisville a better place to live. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, President Walt. Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians, and happy new fiscal year for those of you who live in the nonprofit world like me. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with
test.
Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Rotarians, please be seated. It's now time to introduce our guests. So Rotarians, please make your way to the microphone. And guests, when you're introduced, and Rotarians, please introduce yourself first, then your guest. Guests, please stand to be recognized. And if you'd like to learn more about our club, we will have What is Rotary at this table after the meeting, hosted by our friend Craig Sherman. I will start this off because I've got a lot of guests here, and most of them I had to pay to come. But anyway, life is good. So I'm going to ask my folks over here, all of y'all stand and give a round of applause at the end. But I've got John and Elizabeth Hoagland. John is principal at Hoagland Commercial Realtors. And Elizabeth, his husband, their dear friend's wife, is author of a book, Let's Be Friends, what my sister friends taught me about faith, food, and fun. So our author's here. And next is my sister, Kathy Kuno. She's a retired JCPS BDHD teacher, and she's president of the Louisville Area 10 and Under Tennis Association, where she teaches our kids the game of tennis at the Cabbage Patch, Chickasaw, and other places in the West End. Allie Kuno, my son Dan's wife, who can't be here because he's working in South Carolina, is proving that Dan made the best single decision of his life with Allie. Allie is a kindergarten teacher at St. Margaret Mary for the past 7 years, and you would want, right Kevin, you would want Miss Allie as your teacher. That one of Kevin's children is in Allie's class. And finally, my lovely wife Lynn. What can I say? I wouldn't be here without her. We've been married 37 years, and while she never said, I married you for better for worse, but not for lunch, she is so thankful for Thursdays. Lynn is a tutor and everyone reads, and during the pandemic, she taught with the Hugs program, virtually through the Hugs program. She's been president of the Glenview Garden Club, on the board of the Waterfront Botanical Garden, and is a horticulture judge for the Garden Club of America, where I am known as Lynn's plant schlepper. So thank you all. And next we got Tom.
Thank you, President Walt. I'm Tom Bonert, and my guest today is Scott Woodward, a friend all the way back to college days. Scott is a retired anesthetist, and welcome, Scott.
Hello, Jeff Hendricks with Interfaith Paths of Peace. My guest, my guest is Richard Whitlock. He is a colleague that works with me at Interfaith Paths of Peace on violence prevention work. So he's doing some really wonderful stuff in our community. Welcome, Richard. Thank you.
President Walt, Mark Poole with Capital's Planning Partners. My guest is David Heiss, our new COO, who started Tuesday and still hasn't quit, so that's a good sign.
President Walt, my name is Ashley Brower with the Foundation for Healthy Kentucky. My guest today is Larry Horn. He is Executive Director at Amplify Louisville.
Good afternoon, President Walt. Craig Mooney with Bussey Construction. My guest today is Ron Carews. Ron is the former owner of J.P. Carews Restaurant in St. Matthews and also Bistro 1860 off of Brownsboro Road.
And Ron has been mentoring at Western Iroquois for 3 years now? 1 year. Seems like three, sorry. Hello, Henry.
President Walt, you know, that really has a good ring. I'm delighted to introduce Donald Whitfield, who is no stranger to many of you. He native to Chicago and retired from the Great Books Foundation. Donald Whitfield.
President Walt, fellow Rotarians, and distinguished and honored guests, I have two guests with me to introduce to you today. First, please stand, is Mr. Christopher Twist. Christopher Twist manages his family's portfolio of real estate and is also identified with Hale Realty. Christopher, welcome, and a prospective new member, I think. guest today is Lacey T. Smith, former state senator here in the beautiful Commonwealth of Kentucky and co-founder of Fillmore LLC, a very successful third-party logistics and warehousing business, the gentleman with whom I live. Thank you.
President Walt, I'm Sophia Fisher from Northwestern Mutual. I'm proud to have my dad here with me today, Dan Fisher. He's recently retired after 40 years owning and operating the Daniel Fisher Landscape Nursery. Thank you.
Shorty here. Good afternoon, I'm Barbara Collins, and it's so good to see people 2.5 years later. Hello, everybody. I have with me today Anita Streeter. She is the outgoing chair of the Opera Committee and also the chair of the Wilson House Tour that's coming up, that you all are going to be welcome to join us. Thank you.
Paula Harshaw, long-term Rotarian, and I'm delighted to invite a former Rotarian, Annette Grisanti, who is still very, very active as a board member with Gilda's Club. So since I'm last, I think we should give her a rousing applause.
Well, honored guest, when the meeting's over, the table at my left, what is Rotary? Craig Sherman. Is Craig here? There he is. There, of course he's here. Craig's always here. Craig will be leading that short discussion about what is Rotary and start you on the path to becoming a member. Now we would like to recognize and thank these Rotarians who set up automatically recurring contributions to the Rotary Fund and or the Rotary International Foundation. We will also be featuring these folks on our new website, and as a reminder, we are no longer adding contributions to your dues. So if you don't see your name up here and you've been giving automatically, either talk to Delene, look for your May 25th email that tells you how to set this up. We need more folks to do this automatically, and see Delene if you want to do that. Thank you very much. Now, we have a very special recognition, and I'm going to invite Karen Morrison to please join me on the podium. Karen is President and CEO of Gilda's Club Kentuckiana and Chair of our Awards and Recognition Committee.
Thank you, President Walt. Good afternoon, everyone. Since 1991, the Rotarian of the Year Award is presented each year to a member of the Rotary Club of Louisville who over the recent past has demonstrated adherence to the tenets of Rotary's four-way test in business and professional life, as well as in Rotary and civic activities. This individual has made exceptional contributions to our community and to our Rotary Club. A Rotarian since 2017, the winner of this year's Rotarian of the Year Award has been one of the most consistent attendees throughout the roller coaster of the last 2+ years. Not only has he shown up, but he has been working hard at almost every meeting. His efforts, in fact, helped to ensure that those who did not feel safe to attend, who preferred to join from home, could do so, while also ensuring a great experience for those of us in the room. And he was able to even ensure that those who were unable to join virtually or in person could view the meeting after the fact through the YouTube recording. Technology has long been one of our biggest challenges, and the pandemic certainly increased that challenge exponentially. This Rotarian rose to the challenge. In addition to his role with technical support, this year's winner has chaired our Public Image Committee while serving as the chair for the District 6710 Public Image Committee as well. He has taught sessions at conferences, submitted articles for the Spectrum, submitted award nominations for our club, and so much more, of which I'm sure few, if any of us, are even aware. He updated our website and is in the process of updating it yet again, as well as producing a new backdrop and banners for meetings and updating our meeting PowerPoint template. Without him, we could not have continued as smoothly as we did through this pandemic. The staff have relied heavily on him all year, and he has stepped up over and over, always with a positive attitude, despite overwhelming demands in his personal and professional life as well. He's a tremendous value to this club, and it is an honor to present the Rotarian of the Year Award to Kevin McCarran, founder and designer of Production Creative.
y'all can have a seat now, but because of Kevin's, of course I left my script over there. Because of Kevin's hard work, the Rotary Board has decided to fulfill his obligation for a Paul Harris Fellow Award, and so we're presenting this to Kevin at the same time today. So welcome to that club as well, Kevin. All right. Now, I'm happy to turn the podium over to today's announcer, Greg Braun, President and founder of Made in Louisville and Paper Chem. He's a Paul Harris Fellow, chair of our fundraiser for this year, you have more to follow, and vice chair of our social committee. He's Rotarian of the Year as well, and one of the best darn presidents we've ever had. Thank you, Greg, and don't take too long.
Thank you, President Wall. Hey, before I start the announcements, one quick thing. Let's give ourselves a round of applause. This is our 111th year of being around Rotary Club. Come on, guys. Isn't that great? I mean, we've been through it all. Recession, we've been through the pandemic, we've been through the dollhouse food. We've been through every disaster that can be thrown our way. So now, some announcements. After the meeting, new members and anyone that wishes to join is going to be our continuing Rotary University. That's where we tell our new members all the stuff that goes on with the club. We have a big club, and we have about 29 committees. So after this meeting, table over here, we're going to be talking, the professor is me, so you know that's going to be crazy. And we're going to be talking about all the committees and how to get plugged in to our Rotary Club. Rotarian Cynthia Collier, President and CEO of Mr. P Express and also a Paul Harris Fellow. She's going to be speaking at the July 13th Network of Entrepreneurial Women. She's going to share her insights on building the business for the ground up. And see Sparks for more information on how to register and to attend to support her. Also from Rotarian Ward Wilson, the Kentucky Waterways Alliance is planning a listening session about the Ohio River Restoration Plan on Wednesday, August 10th in the evening at the Louisville Community Boathouse in Waterfront Park. For more information how to register, please see your Sparks. And then finally, I'd like to remind everyone that we're quickly approaching our head count deadline for our Rotary Soccer Day. This is like one of our best events that we have. If you haven't been out to the Louisville Stadium, you need to go. It's really fun. We've got about 50 tickets. They're playing Tampa Bay Rowdies at 7:30. Then we're going to meet beforehand at the Rabbit Hole Bar, where Walt's going to buy everybody a beer. He doesn't know that yet. That wasn't in the script. And then we're going to see the game. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Please RSVP and let us know. It's a really fun time. And that's all the announcements for today. Back to President Walt.
Thank you, Greg, and for y'all that don't know it, Greg and I go back and forth all the time. I will get him back fourfold for that one. Anyway, all right, it's my duty and honor today to introduce our guest speaker. I would like to tell you a little bit about Professor John Hale. At my very first meeting in 2010, Dr. Hale, archaeology professor, was our speaker, and man, I wanted to become a club member because he was that good. I remember Ed Galloway telling me, well, that not all the speakers are like Dr. Hale. And then Paul Bickle added quickly that no other speaker would be as engaging, passionate, or entertaining. So when I became president-elect, there was no other person that I wanted to kick off my year than Professor John Hale. Back in the prehistory times, when I was in college at Vanderbilt, and I know there was an over and under about when I would get a plug for Vanderbilt at the end, and I just did, so figure it out. Go Vandy boys. Anyway, just for you, Jolene. Anyway, a friend of mine suggested I take a course from Dr. Ned Neighbors on ancient history of Rome and Italy. It met at 8 o'clock in the morning on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Why would I want to do that? I was told because the professor was so animated and interesting that I would want to go and hear anything he had to say. And boy, was I happy to go to class every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 8 o'clock, as far as you know. But I also took every other class that Dr. Neighbors taught, whatever the time. I feel the same way about Professor Hale. He is a lecturer at the teaching company. He has six courses there, 5 on ancient history, and I have listened to most of them over the years. And he's taught one on public speaking. John could make my iPhone be really interesting. Heck, he'd even make me interesting. So, I am not an amateur archaeologist, but because of Dr. Hale, I have more interest in it. He can make anything interesting. Dr. Hale is the Director of Liberal Studies at the University of Louisville. He earned his bachelor's at Yale and PhD at the University of Cambridge. Professor Hale teaches introductory courses on archaeology, as well as more specialized courses on the Bronze Age, the Vikings, the Celtic world, the Roman world, nautical and underwater archaeology, which we will hear about today. He's an archaeologist with more than 30 years of fieldwork experience. He's excavated at a Romano British town in Lincolnshire, England, and at the Roman villa of Torre de Palma in Portugal, and I'm sure that my Kentucky accent didn't do that right. Among other places, he carried out interdisciplinary studies of ancient oracle sites in Greece and Turkey, including the famous Delphic Oracle, and participated in an undersea research for lost fleets from the time of the Persian War. Professor Hale has received many awards. Distinguished teaching include the Pan-Hellenic Teacher of the Year Award and the Delphi Central Award. His writing has been featured in journals like Antiquity, the Classical Bulletin, the Journal of Roman Archaeology, and Scientific American. And now this is what we've been waiting for, and what many of you in this room have been waiting to hear. So let's give a hearty welcome to Professor John Hale.
Thank you all. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. For archaeologists, things and places are 90% of what we're interested in, so there's always a lot of pictures. So I hope everybody can see a screen as I take you to one of the most interesting underwater sites in the world, the ancient harbor of King Herod of Judea at Caesarea Maritima on the Mediterranean coast of Israel. You are seeing here a panorama of the harbor by a modern artist. You can see there's a gigantic lighthouse nearest you on the right-hand side. Remember, these were the days when no electricity, so you had to carry tons of firewood up to the top of that tower, loaded on the ever-burning fire, so that people far out at sea could see the fire while it was dark and the smoke during the day. So to lead people into the port. Caesarea was the port of Judea. If you look at this map of the Roman Empire at its height, you can see Judea down in the east, right where modern Israel is today. What lies beyond is the orange of Arabia, which was all desert, and the Romans never bothered to conquer it. But Judea had a seaport where, as the Romans like to think of it, God forgot to put one. Israel has a very straight coast, and it's a very dangerous coast because the big storms come barreling out of the Atlantic, sweep eastward across the Mediterranean, and hit that long straight coastline where you see Judea on the map, with devastating effect to any ship that doesn't have a safe harbor. And for Israel, no safe harbors. So what are we going to do about it? Well, fortunately, King Herod of Judea had been a boyhood friend of the fellow who grew up to be the Emperor Augustus of Rome. And when King Herod decided to play ball with the Romans and become what they called a client kingdom, he could rule his own place, his own domestic policy as he willed as king, but he turned his foreign policy over to the Romans. His troops, his ships became part of the Roman army and Roman navy. And in Judea, therefore, the Romans did a whole lot of investment. The Emperor Augustus decided to build a harbor where, as I like to think of it, God forgot to put one, on that long, straight coast. And it's that harbor we are going to be looking at today. So a client kingdom, you're an independent entity, you can have your own internal policies, but you turn your foreign policy over to Rome, and every year you have to send a certain amount of tribute up to Rome to pay for the legions that are protecting you from invasion, to keep the sea lanes free, to keep all of your population in good health. This is a wonderful modern picture which imagines that we are sitting on an eagle's back somewhere south of Caesarea, looking up the coast, Mediterranean Sea off to the left, and that grand Roman city. You can see it's on a grid plan, just like downtown Louisville. Romans borrowed this from the Greeks, the idea of these squares to make a city easy to govern. If you're in any really ancient city, you will find that the streets go everywhere, sight lines are short, and it was once explained to me that this was done so that nobody but a local could find their way around. So if an enemy ever got into your city, they'd be lost. And you, the home team, would have a tremendous advantage in trying to take your city back. You can see a gigantic temple there in the center, down by the waterside, with its red roof and its columns. Romans imported their own religion to Judea, but they guaranteed the freedom of religion of all the Jews and Christians. Actually, Jews were grandfathered in by the Romans. Christians were persecuted because Christians would not recognize the emperor of Rome as a god. And so all of the Christian persecutions were based on that. Now, Caesarea Maritima was something that Caesar Augustus invested in, and that's his name in the front of Caesarea. That's Caesar, with an EA on the end, city of Caesar. There were cities of Caesar all over the Roman Empire, from the Black Sea to Britain, but this turned out to be the biggest, the most famous, the most important. And to build it, he turned to Italy. You can see the boot of Italy there on the map. And the little inset shows you that Bay of Naples, which is dominated by the big volcano, Mount Vesuvius. Mount Vesuvius was an incredible, important resource for Roman builders, architects, engineers, because Mount Vesuvius is made of material called pozzolana by the modern Italians. If you mix it with ash, instead of using beach sand, you've got a concrete that you can pour straight into seawater and it will harden up underwater. No exposure to air needed. It's a chemical bond instead of a drying out. So this is still the strongest concrete in the world. And Caesar Augustus, here on his usual commanding, do this, ordered that huge chunks of Mount Vesuvius be loaded on Roman ships, ferried to the far end of the Mediterranean Sea, and poured into the water at Caesarea. So this is their starting point. Herculaneum and Pompeii were those cities buried by the volcano eruption of Mount Vesuvius. But Vesuvius was most important for this mineral product, this pozzolana. And there's a lot of it. And it's that red color that you can see in this modern photo of the top of the dome of the Vesuvius. It's what it looks like when it's wet and in your hand. Pozzolana, a humble looking substance. But when you have poured it into seawater and it hardens up, it is literally as hard as granite. And it will harden underwater without being exposed to the air. You do have to have a frame to put it in. So, being Caesar Augustus, he decided he'd use the best timber on earth, the same timber that King Solomon, centuries earlier, had used to build the roof beams of his great temple in Jerusalem, cedar of Lebanon. Still a legendary source of timber in the ancient world. The Lebanon range of mountains was inland from Caesarea, and I've got a picture there for you. To me, they're the most majestic trees in the world, and they go right up the slopes to the snow line in these mountains. They carried down hundreds of these trees in order to make the framework of the concrete harbor walls and breakwaters out of that cedar. And I've done some diving in the harbor. It's a real excitement when you can go down and actually still see chunks of that cedar 2,000 years later embedded in the concrete of the harbor walls. Now, Roman engineers were the people who really built the Roman Empire, the Corps of Engineers. The legions always like to take the credit, but the legions never got anywhere without the Corps of Engineers to build the bridges that got them over the rivers, that built the ports, that sailed them to distant parts. So they imported, Caesar sent from Rome a huge corps of this engineers group, and they took those cedar of Lebanon logs and built these like checkerboard frames. And they maneuvered each one into a position where they could then build up cedar underwater on the sides and pour the concrete mix straight into this box they created that has a top on the surface and cedar walls going down to the bottom. And the result was that as the years went by and some of the upper parts sank deeper into the water, people like me, I'm there on the right, and other diving archaeologists can go down and see in the submerged parts of the harbor the cross pieces where the Cedar of Lebanon beams used to be, but of course they rotted away sometime over the last 2,000 years. There is a Roman inscription from Caesarea that introduces another historical figure that many of you have heard of. His name was Pontius Pilate. He was the equivalent of a Roman governor for what we call Israel today, Judea, and Caesarea was his headquarters. When Paul the Apostle claimed his Roman citizenship and said, I demand to go to Rome, and the local governor said, you have appealed to Caesar you shall go, greatest line in ancient history. It was Pontius Pilate and his successors who would have sent that Jewish person on to Rome with a safe passage. This is the only known inscription in the world that mentions Pontius Pilate during his fairly brief period of rule in the roost as the chief Roman administrator. And we have to think that some of his short term is due to the fact of the problems, of the riots of Jews, of the early Christians after the crucifixion of Jesus that terminated his sort of rule as the procurator very quickly. Jesus of Nazareth was on trial before Pontius Pilate, and that was not in Caesarea. Pontius Pilate came up to Jerusalem. He came at every Passover. That was a time they were afraid there might be Jewish revolts. The Jews were very rebellious about being embraced by the Roman Empire, and so Pilate would go up and sit in a great council hall, and Jesus was brought before him there during the trial before his crucifixion. All the death procedures, it's Roman law that he had violated. And so he is going to be crucified in the Roman way on the cross, and he will meet Roman officials like Pontius Pilate in due process legal proceedings about have you earned the death penalty, which Pontius Pilate decided yes. A great apostle of Jesus, a man named Saul, a Jew, later known as Paul, and I didn't learn this in Sunday school, learned it later. Paul is Paulus, it's a nickname, and it means little guy or shorty. But that stuck, and Saul did not, so we call him Paul today. But as a Roman citizen, when he was accused of having disturbed the peace by espousing this new religion, and the big problem was Jesus never said anything about the Caesar, except the famous render to Caesar the things that are Caesar, render to God the things that are God's. Nonetheless, many early Christians refused to worship the emperor. They were perceived as traitors, seditious people, and so the tolerance that had been extended to the Jews was not extended to these early Christians. And so those of you who are Christians are probably aware of the martyrdom, the persecutions of early Christians. It was started with this refusal to recognize the emperor Caesar as a god. And Paul was one of those people who refused to do that. So he was brought before the Roman governor in Caesarea for trial, but he was a Roman citizen and could demand to be taken to Rome and be tried before Caesar himself. So Paul was in Caesarea, but that was not where his ultimate trial took place. This is what Caesarea looks like today. You can see there are ancient ruins everywhere on that promontory. There's the ruins of King Herod's swimming pool on that promontory. Can you see that little blue rectangle in the middle of the peninsula that's sticking down at the bottom of the image? And then the ruins of that city, now exposed by 100 years of worth of work made by Israeli and international archaeologists like me who go over and help with the work. The part that interests me, I'm an underwater archaeologist, shipwrecks, sunken sites and cities. I had the good fortune to get to know people who were working in Caesarea Harbor. They invited me to come over here from the University of Louisville, which is my home base. And so I spent many very exciting summers there diving on submerged structures that went back 2,000 years but were now submerged in the harbor waters, and also shipwrecks. People hadn't realized that there were shipwrecks that, as the ships had approached Caesarea, they would wreck at sea, never make it in. It's probably always happened during a storm when nobody was keeping watch, and nobody went out and salvaged these shipwrecks. They were in fairly shallow water. There were diving guilds where men and women both could dive down to 100 feet, salvage the treasures from shipwrecks, but we found a lot that had been missed. And this is the man who's in charge of all that underwater archaeology at Caesarea, my friend Kobe. That is the nickname for Jacob or Jacob in the Bible. So Kobe Sharvit, and he's the Israel Antiquities Authority, and it's his job to monitor all of the underwater work at Caesarea Harbor, all of the shipwrecks, all of those buildings that are now underwater because of earthquakes that have dropped them below the level. You've got complete mosaic floors, you've got cemeteries with the tombs still intact. It is one of the world's treasure houses of the biblical past. And I'm going to be introducing you to two ancient treasure ships that we discovered at Caesarea Maritima during the summers that I spent over there on leave from the University of Louisville. And I've got little iconic pictures. Up in the far right, you see what each one of these treasure ships would have looked like. A sailing ship with a big single mast, small crew, but definitely some soldiers on board because they were carrying gold, silver, precious things, and you want to keep pirates at bay if they pick you out as an imperial ship and a good target for getting rich by taking it. So on the far left, we found a ship full of bronzes. And you see that little lady who looks like the Statue of Liberty. She is a Roman goddess. The spikes around her head suggest she may be a moon goddess or somebody to do with light. At any rate, she was part of a lamp. The hand of my colleague, the diver, who's holding it, can you see that hollow thing at the bottom left corner? That fit onto a lamp that you would have carried around your house at night with all of its little wicks burning and the oil that was in the basin of the lamp. And she would have been a nice emblem of light. You can see the rays of the sun coming out of her head. Then look to the middle and you can see, this is a colleague of mine holding a whole lot of gold coins. 1,000 years after the Romans, right at the time of the Crusades, the colleagues of Egypt were trying to support the Islamic effort against those wretched crusaders like Richard Lionheart coming over and trying to take Jerusalem back for the Christians. And one of their gold coin, let's pay the troops ships from Egypt sank in Caesarea Harbor. Must have been a dark and stormy night because nobody salvaged it, and there it sat for another 1,000 years until underwater archaeology team that I was lucky enough to be part of discovered it. I will never again in my life have the experience of running my hand through sand and you pick it up and yes, there's 13 gold coins and you raise your hand and they say, well, that's not very many, but anyway, we added to it and we got several thousand. We've got a picture in the top right of what these ships might have looked like. Remember, these are ships that are vulnerable to pirates because they don't carry the huge crews. Roman warships were immense long things, loaded with rowers, but loaded with members of the legions, archers, swordsmen, spear bearers. And the merchant ships were always needing to travel in convoy with these great naval vessels, or they were sitting ducks for pirates. And that was one thing that the Romans never could fully get rid of: pirates. So they were as much a part of the Roman world as they are pirates of the Caribbean of our own more recent time. One of our really interesting discoveries involved the spread of Christianity. That's a little lamp handle, a little ceramic lamp handle. There would have been a bowl that held olive oil. You light a wick and you've got a little flaming thing you could carry around like a candle. But this would have been an early Christian, being sure that other Christians would know we're together. Other people might not have understood that that little cross meant the owner is a Christian. It was still a forbidden religion. So we found an entire Roman shipwreck from what's called the crisis of the 3rd century. Rome almost went under in the 200s of our era, from barbarian invasions, from plagues, from economic crises like our own American Depression. And so Caesarea was a gathering point where the government tried to bring together precious metal. They could strike new coins and keep the government afloat because the government would have money. Well, we found the anchor of this ship. That was the first thing we found. Anchors are made of iron. They last after everything else in the ship is long gone except for the ballast. So we found the anchor and we started looking around it. And we found masses of bronze coins. They were concreted together because as they oxidized under there, they don't rust, but it's the same kind of process iron does. They welded themselves together. They were originally in bags, and probably leather bags from the mint in Rome, and they just made these lumps of money. Yes, these were exciting times. And we found this bronze lamp handle in the form of a goddess. We couldn't find the rest of the lamp, the bowl that would have held the oil, and we realized as we got more and more of this parts of things made of bronze, this was like a scrap bronze steamer that was going around to every port and getting all the scrap bronze it could, bringing it here to Caesarea where there was an official mint of the Roman government and it could be minted into coins, and then you pay the legions to keep them in the field and keep the Roman machine going. So she was probably destined for being melted down and turned into small change. Glad that didn't happen. As was this portrait of, probably it's one of the greatest Roman emperors, Trajan, and his CD was broken when he went down, so this was probably scrap metal being sent to the mint. There was a Roman mint in Caesarea, and they were going to make more coins. We ultimately got a little portrait gallery of gods, emperors. That's Hermes or Mercury, the far left. The goddess Selene, who is the moon goddess. You can see her little crescent moon at the top of her hairdo. And then that's Trajan, right there in the front. And here we find, that was a little part of his face. We ultimately found the rest of his head, and this was a dive I was on, so I got showered up and held it up for the camera when we got back on shore. And then little tiny things at the other end of the scale, this little tiny winged Cupid, Eros as the Greeks called him, he's a weight. We found a little pan that would have been part of the measuring weight. He is a specific weight for measuring out very valuable things. And the valuable things were probably precious metals, but could have been something like poppy seeds or something from the opium trade. They were into these drugs too. Could have been a piece of silk. All kinds of things would be measured out by this little fellow. Now, many of our shipwrecks date to the Great Roman Depression. They had a century of crisis, the 3rd century of our era, the 200s. And it's kind of like our Great Depression in America that was kind of a crucible for us, getting through the 20s. And so up at the top, politically, they had 31 emperors in 1 year. That means some of them were a few days, others a few weeks. Chaos. But the amazing thing is that Rome was so strong it managed to get its act together again, repel the pirates, repel the external enemies, and from 300 on, you see, they're back to the norm. So it was a very impressive thing that they got through, and we got records of that in Caesarea Harbor. We believe that this cargo of silver coins, which we found fresh from the mint, can you see this has not been rubbed or worn down by being passed from hand to hand? We found thousands of these coins on the floor of the harbor. That was a treasure ship going out from a mint or coming in from a mint in Greece or Cyprus or somewhere to pay the legions, to pay the troops so that Rome could continue to have a stable eastern frontier protected from the Arabs, protected from the Persians. Well, part of the fall of the Roman Empire in the East is due to accidents like this, these shipwrecks that sink the money that would have paid the legions break up, and you've got what my school books call barbarians coming in. They were, of course, not barbarians. They were Germans and Persians and people just as civilized as the Romans. But I should mention about that word barbarian. It's a Greek word, and all it means is I can't understand what they are saying. B-A-R was the Greek version of bar. That's the Greek version of our blah. B-L-A-H, instead of B-A-R. And barbarians are people who go blah, blah. So it doesn't have the big ring that it has for us, but they sure let the Roman legions have it. And the Roman legions, because, things like the treasure ships weren't getting through to pay them, they're feeling disaffected. Why am I putting my life on the line? And I'm still owed a year's worth of pay. So this was this crisis of the 3rd century, the 200s, when the whole empire almost went over. And so we are lucky to have this little art gallery of Roman bronzes, because if they made it to port, they were going to be melted down immediately and turned into small change to pay the soldiers. Beautiful things. You can tell how desperate the Romans were to keep things going, that they were sacrificing many of their treasures in the war effort. Cargo of coins, cast bronzes, and it was a very moving moment to be able, that's my hand, to be able to fit. We all took turns shaking the hand of this emperor. It seemed to be reaching out, wanting to be grasped, a warm, living human grip. But then there was another hand that we thought was sending a very different message. And it was purely accidental. The fingers broke without forethought down on the seafloor, but got a good laugh out of the angry Caesar telling us just where to go. And then this was a truly exciting day. That's Kobe Sharvet again, Jakob Sharvet, the head of Israel's underwater work. I'm with him here on the day that we went out and found the biggest fish hook I've ever seen in my life. It was bronze, it's on a bronze chain, this gigantic thing. There it is, laid down. And I thought, what in the world were they fishing for? Well, every fisherman in the harbor got in line to tell me exactly what they were fishing for. These are for sharks. Sharks can bite through any cord. They cannot bite through a metal chain. So even today, can you see that metal wire that's at the top on the modern shark, giant shark hook? Same thing had been invented 2,000 years ago because people like eating sharks. We also found, on the lighter side of life, glass marbles. They had been pretty much eroded by the sea, but there they are coming up round, and they cleaned up really beautifully. Rare Roman glass marbles. And so, hashtag news on the internet, heard about all the stuff we were finding, and a friend in America sent me this and said, you all are in the news. Is this the biggest archaeological find in 30 years? My comment, probably not. But it did shed a lot of light on Rome's greatest crisis, that crisis of the 3rd century when they almost went under in the biggest depression the ancient world had ever seen. We're going to go quickly on now because we're leaving the Romans. This is a local diver, a retired doctor who just went out every day in his scuba gear and went around the harbor, and when he found stuff, he turned it into the Antiquities Service. But he was the one who started finding gold coins on the harbor floor from a gold coin shipwreck. He led me down to the place he found them. That's me with the oxygen tank on the back, moving stones in the area where Zika Foyer had found these gold coins. And, I got to tell you, I will never again dive in a situation where at the end of a half-hour dive, I come up with that many gold coins in my hand. There is something about gold. It will not tarnish, it will not rust, it will not corrode. This is why our ancestors decided it's the landmark among all minerals of what is precious. That's Kobe holding another group. We were able to date all the coins. They were almost all minted in Cairo, which was a brand new city then. This is 1,000 years ago. We're out of the ancient times. We're at the time of the early Crusades. And this is the time when the caliphs, the Arab leaders of Egypt, were trying to support the home team against the crusaders from Europe who were coming over to take the Holy Land back for Christianity. So that's myself, Bridget Buxton from University of Rhode Island, handfuls of gold coins. It was great while it lasted. And this was the most interesting to all of us. It proved it came from a shipwreck. That is a spike, an iron spike from a ship. Can you see their funny gold things at the left end? The gold coins were captured by the spike as it bloomed with rust, oxidizing underwater, and got this rust coating, but the rust glommed onto some of those gold coins. And we took all of our gold coins to the National Museum in Jerusalem and showed them to, this is Israel's expert on coins. He dated every single one of them to the year it was minted, so that they're all from Cairo, from Egypt. They are trying to help the local home team, as I said, repel those pesky invaders like Richard the Lionheart and the other crusaders who were trying to take the Holy Land back. They are part of this forgotten empire of Egyptian leaders, Fatimid caliphs they were called, and they were an Islamic kingdom, and they ran strong for the better part of 2 centuries, and they were the ones who created Cairo. And Cairo was for them like Fort Knox is to America, a place where you keep your wealth. It was the treasure house of the country rather than an administrative center. So very interesting to see that, very interesting to come up with these thousands of coins from that Cairo mint. And this is one of the reasons the home team had so much trouble against the crusaders from Europe, like Richard the Lionheart. Shipments of gold like this to get through and support the Islamic effort to repel the crusaders were routinely being lost. We also were happy to find, this is Bridget, my colleague from Rhode Island, holding up the anchor from that ship that went down. And the anchors are like car models. You can date them. So we were able to date the ship to exactly that time of the Crusades. There it is, all cleaned up for its drawing, made in Egypt by this Islamic Fatimid, these caliphs, about 1025. So even before the famous 1066 in England, you've got all of this high politics and drama and invasions going on at the other end of the Mediterranean. This is probably what the galley looked like. And so we have the gold coins that are part of this forgotten empire, the Fatimid Islamic rulers who unified all of North Africa, half of Arabia, into one gigantic, extraordinarily wealthy realm. Now, to close, in 2021, a big discovery was made on the seafloor. Caesarea Harbor faces west. As storm winds come in from the west, they churn up the seafloor, and you get brand new things revealed that have been hidden for centuries under the sand after every storm. So all the archaeologists go out every time the seas come after a big wind and a big storm and see what's there. And my friend Kobe Sharvett, the head of the underwater for research for Israel, he was coast to coast and ultimately all over the world holding this sword. This is a crusader sword found in 2021, lying on the bottom. Its ship must have sunk because you're never going to throw a sword like this overboard. And so here was a ship coming from Western Europe to try to help retake the Holy Land from the Muslims. That's what the Crusades were. And this must have been the king's or the general's sword. There's Kobe holding it. That's one whale of a weapon. And you can see how nature has tried to make it a little reef. Can you see all the corals and shells that are encrusting it? It's beautiful as it is, but of course it's going to have all that stripped off and go back to the way it looked all those centuries ago when it went to the bottom. So I've given you a whirlwind tour of what is, to me, the most exciting archaeological site I've ever worked at in terms of all phases of history, all different kinds of experiences you have underwater, the range of artifacts that we discovered, the links to important moments. And this is for all of us, this was our favorite mosaic. This was in front of the house. It's a Roman mosaic, was near the entrance of this house, which probably belonged to a ship's captain for whom Caesarea was his home port. The top line says Irene, and that's the Greek word peace. And anybody who's named Irene, that's what the name means, peace. Peace be upon your coming in and upon your going out. And that's a great thing to have at a harbor. A little motto on invoking divine blessings on these most imperiled of all peoples, seafarers. And for centuries, Caesarea Maritima was one of the most important of the Mediterranean's places for seafarers, a place where East and West truly met, and where I had the great privilege, working at the University of Louisville, to spend some of the happiest summers of my life. So thank you for listening, and very honored to be here.
So Rotarians, if you've got questions for Professor Hale, please head to the microphone. I'm going to start off with a question that's not on your topic, but just wondered if you had an opinion on the benefits of a liberal art education.
I have a million opinions in favor of a liberal arts education. I think especially in America, it's important. We're all going to be voters when we grow up. All of our students will be voters. I think you want to understand a nation's problems, from military to national parks, to use of resources, to social issues within cities, rural versus urban. All kinds of things have to be in our minds if we want to go to the polling booth and vote for the right person as we see it, or support the right legislation to move forward. So I think a liberal education does that, and it also means so many people are together. You mix and mingle, you rub shoulders with people who may be in completely different aspects of the world once you all get out of college. But you're all together, you're all in the same class, you're all keeping in touch, so that doctors and lawyers and archaeologists and engineers and military people, all kinds, have had that common experience in America for 4 years. Europe doesn't quite have that. People go to universities that are much more focused. If you're headed for medicine, you aren't in the same place where the lawyers go. You aren't in the same place where the historians will go. It's not like America, and I think it's one of the things that really keeps America strong.
Thank you. Henry? John, thank you so much for being here. You're just such a magnificent community treasure. I've got two quick questions. One is, what is the international rule or law of discovery? You were working with an Israeli in a different country, and how does that work today around the world?
The international laws are very clear. A shipwreck belongs, in international waters, belongs to the person who finds the shipwreck and raises and reports the first artifact from that shipwreck. Why did Bob Ballard have the rights to excavate Titanic? He spent years devising a little sub that could get down to the bottom of the Atlantic. He followed the Titanic's supposed route, and they'd gotten a little bit off on it where they thought it sank. But he went down and found it. Scientifically, it's his ship. So he was very generous. I brought him here to Louisville during a semester once to talk to my underwater archaeology class. Yes, we were very excited. And he's a wonderful speaker. And he didn't minimize the excitement he felt. He said, I felt like a kid. When you go down and there's the Titanic, the joyous feeling wore off as they began to come across the human cost. People still trapped inside the ship, the horror of those who couldn't escape. But every nation has an apron around its own coast that it controls. Israel controls that. I am invited there because my Israeli colleagues have asked me to come and be part of the team. Without their invitation, I couldn't do that. But similarly, if there was something in America that I knew about and was working on, I could invite them to come over and we'd be an international team, but working on an American site. So that's how it works.
And where would we see the discoveries you made? Where are they today?
Everything from Caesarea is either in the museum in Jerusalem, like the gold coins, that was the National Museum of Israel, or exhibits have been created at Caesarea, which is a huge visitor center for Israel. And so thousands of people walk through, see them, hear about what you've been hearing about now all the time.
One other quick question, if I could. Tell us how you would clean the sword you discovered with all that.
Yeah,
crustaceans.
The iron is a real nuisance as a archaeological metal. It loses its own self. Bronze gets a patina on it. Bronze, the copper and the tin in bronze, they don't like to oxidize with the free oxygen in the water the way iron does. Iron just blooms with rust. And so getting that out, often you're losing part of the sword. The concretions that are on the sword that I showed you, that sword hilt would be bronze, not iron. So that's going to come off great. I'll kind of miss the concretions. I thought it was a beautiful thing with all of the sea growths mingling with the artifact from the Crusades. But I know they'll take hundreds of pictures of it, and it'll be well preserved. So there are conservators. That is a career for people interested in archaeology who just want to know, how can I get all of that stuff off that artifact, reveal it again, and then stabilize it so for its life now out of the sea, it can go on for centuries and still be something people will be able to understand and look at.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Hale, I'm Tom Bogert, and I'm curious, you as an underwater archaeologist, I'm sure you don't have just every day is a good day at the office. There must be boring days, and I'm wondering also about dangerous days. Are there any that you could describe?
Well, I did some work. I put together a thing called the Persian War Shipwreck Survey, where we went to every single place that in the great kings of Persia, Xerxes, Darius, when they invaded Cyrus, even Greece, they brought shiploads of warriors over, and a lot of those sank. And I was really interested in that period, so they were always specific about where they sank, so we went out and looked for them, and we found one Browns rammable warship. But if I were working in America, I could be the principal person to start up a dig here in America, working through the University of Louisville. But overseas, I've got to be invited by the home team. Israeli archaeologists in Israel, Greek in Greece, Turkish in Turkey. And because all of these countries feel this is their national heritage, they're under the water. These shipwrecks are treasures that they want to preserve, but also get the information from, learn about how they sank to add to their history books, and if there are any weapons, any treasures, any human remains, get those too. Most exciting shipwreck in America, which you can all visit, is the first successful submarine ever created. It's down in Charleston by the harbor. It's called the Hunley, Hunley. It was a submarine built by a rogue engineer to help the Confederacy break the Union blockade in the Civil War. And it had a row of 8 guys sitting inside, side by side, up and down this little tiny submarine, and turning a crank. The crank turned to a propeller, and the propeller could drive the submarine at a target, and it had a torpedo out front. And they managed to sink a Union blockading vessel in the 1860s outside Charleston Harbor. To me, that's the most exciting underwater archaeology museum in America, one of the most exciting in the world, because they found the remains of all those 8 crew members inside. What they not calculated on was if you make your ship into a torpedo's got a recoil like a gun. They were killed in this hollow mass of iron by a shock. And so they were all still seated. All 8 of them were seated to the places. They didn't have a motor. They turned a crank to turn the propeller. They were all still there. The propeller was there. The entire submarine was found after years and years of search, because it didn't send up much of a signal from sonar and things. It's so small. But that's a great, and Charleston's worth visiting anyway, but go see the Hunley Museum and you will be up to here in some of the most exciting discoveries of underwater archaeology.
I want to thank Dr. Hale for this. So I want you to know that a donation is being made in honor of you and speaking today for $500 to the Rotary Club of Louisville's West Louisville Housing Initiative. And for those of you guests in the room or Rotarians that don't know about this, Rotary is raising $5 million for 63 new homeowners in the 9 neighborhoods in West Louisville. And so you're the first recipient of this, and thank you so much. We have one last chore, so people get your tickets out. Oh my, you get to choose.
This is not rigged. I did not know about this till this moment.
All right. So the number is 809-881. Oh, I heard heard an O. Okay, we're going to do it again until we have a winner. Must be presents win. That'll teach somebody to leave early, right? 809-926. I got a bingo. Bingo! It's Ken Savage. All right. See you, Lean, and we'll go over the election. All right. We got just a couple of quick things. We're going to get you out of here in just a few minutes over here. My first week had to be a little bit over, right? All right. Righty. Today, let's see. Oh, and the door prize was for the soccer. What you were worried about? The soccer game. Okay. Next week's meeting will feature Dr. Gordon Tobin. The topic will be War in Ukraine, a tragic human crisis, Louisville's engagement, and historic implications. Please register today by scanning the code on your table or via the link that you'll get soon. All right. I think this is the last. Is this the last one? All right. Now it's time for Walt's Words of Wisdom, WWW, for those of you that don't get it. I know that you think that you heard what I said, but what you heard is not exactly what I meant, but you'll hear that another one. I mean, this was our first meeting. Don't cry because it's over. Smile. There the smile comes. Smile because it happened. But finally, a humorous but true aphorism penned by Thomas Edison, and who knows, he might have even said it while he was working here in Smoketown. Opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. Thank you for attending today's meeting. We've got the Boys Rotary over here. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.